Okay, so we're gonna talk about sunlight on the cylinder. As I've given you guys the notes, one of the things is how to sort of discern how you're setting up your cylinder is also very important. Where if there's, this is more like with with this cylinder where you're setting up. Over here we have local light. And I did some of these quick studies is to show you how you can use shadow and cast shadow to benefit you from setting up an overall setup that can be very, very helpful. So this setup pretty much, if you're lighting from the side or lighting from top, whether it's your we're talking about local light here, it will give you benefits of allowing yourself to have a nice cast shadow and also transitional of form and value change, coming out with a better read, right? So this one here on the second study is basically having that light coming straight from here. So technically, if you have that read, again, the 1, 2, 3 read is very, very important. So if you have a one read, and then if you cast the light straight from the top, like a noon, 12 o'clock setting, it will be pretty much, your cast shadow will be pretty equal, right? One of the things is, we're talking about shadows, we're talking about the geoforms. You want to really understand that when you're casting some of these shadows, even when you're calculating them, you want to remember that these shadows have symmetry. These shadows have proportional values, because we're casting it in perspective, but also at the same time, these shapes, these geoforms are formal and they have a balance of symmetry and proportional values. So when you have this might not be the best choice for setting up your light source. Whether you're doing this, if it's this way, right, where then now the cast shadow might be, that core might be right here, and then the rest of that shadow might come this way. So maybe you're doing it where it's a little bit below horizon line, and then your shadow shape, and that 1 and then 2, right? So this would be 1. Sorry, can't write today. And then 3. So, when you're setting or you're staging your compositions and all that, it's best to set them at where it describes the forms clearly. It also describes the values clearly, and also the 1, 2, 3 read is effective. Remember, when you're doing art, when you're doing all these things, you're still in control of a lot of the elements of staging, right? You can choose the time that you want to. Let's say you want to do sunlight. You can still choose to say, well, I'm going to go at a certain element to do this, and light it at 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock in the morning, obviously, AM, and you get sometimes the best scenarios. Or you do it either maybe 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock if you want to have a certain angle of your object. So these things are important. What I want to really focus on is now the sun side setup. Do ignore these guys, because this is basically, I created this was for local light, and we'll talk about local light in another section of videos. But with sunlight, what's going to happen is, let's say, it's always good to observe and do studies where, you know, these forms are sort of like noted, and basically we're looking at this on this diagram or this quick sketch. We understand that basically that circle or the cylinder, when you do sunlight, one of the key things to remember is sunlight behaves a little differently, where what's going to happen is your sun rays or that sunlight direction is going to cut through by the side. Now some of you guys are wondering, like, well, how do you construct your your elements on the cylinder using sticks? And that's why I drew this or constructed this prior, obviously, where you see this ellipse. And I would definitely recommend you guys constructing these, because when you're splicing it through, you're creating sticks and reference points. And basically, that's what's going to really help you discern the accuracy. So I'm going to use another color. And we obviously we know that we're going to disregard this local light thing. Forgive me for that, for leaving it there, because it was Xeroxed. So basically, I'm just going to take my sunlight, and each of my sticks here, I have one stick here, one stick here. I can say this is A, then this is, they go parallel, right? But also, oh, not that parallel. I have some gunk on my parallel ruler, so it's not functioning. So, making sure it's parallel, your lighting, okay? That's important. Just gonna erase this out. So we want to make sure, let's make it clear. And then basically my shadow direction of these guys, I'm going to cut through. If I'm cutting through this, we also know and understand that this cylinder is below horizon line. And I'm going to use my shadow directional elements where I can use this as my guide, and it's basically, I could use it as my grid, right? So when you're doing these elements, just erase that, because I want to stay with my grid. The grid is already being established in perspective, right? So you're going to use that to help you sort of end. So basically, like, this point will hit this, and this point. So let's say I like to name it so I don't get confused. A1, this B, B1, and then as I'm going through this, I'm also sticking with pretty much where my grid is, so it helps, right? And then basically I'm also going to cut down another sticks, which is my C, and then it's going to hit here, or it's going to, you can create as many points as you want. Obviously, the more points, so this is my C, so this is my A, okay, this is my B1, A1, and then this becomes my C1, All right, but at this time, I know that it's pretty comparable, right? And once I have these 3 points, I sort of could imagine, because going back to what I studied earlier, we agreed that this as a whole can and also must have symmetry in the cast shadow. All right. We also know that a cast shadow is going to be elliptical because of why? The cast shadow shape. And you can say, well, how do you know the shape of it? How do you know? Because we also understand that in a sunlight setup cast shadow scenario, it's going to be an ellipse. And so what's going to happen is, I know that if this is going to be parallel with this on the sides, so that's important. That's something to remember. So therefore, what I can do is, within the A and B area, and also I'm going to just, I found a larger ellipse. I know that these 2 points are going to come out this way. And if I were to project and know that the symmetry should be sustained, what's going to happen is also that B and C point, right? We know that the C1 is right here. That the symmetry is going to sustain itself. So now this is going to be my cast shadow, okay? And we're using obviously a larger ellipse to draw that. Okay, and we know that it's tangents that center, and basically also at the same time this technically becomes our cast shadow. Okay. Sorry about the I have a small space to draw with because of the camera. So so basically your A1, B1 and C1 becomes your areas of reference point. Okay. The deal here is, well, how do you know, or how do you know that this will angle this way or this will angle this way? And those are good questions. What you can do, obviously, I'm not going to have time to draw more sticks, but what technically you can do is you can say, well, I'm not confident in my settings, So you can draw more sticks along that surface, along even in the other side of the surface, and then start casting, making sure your cast shadows will come down parallelly. Okay, that's very, very important. And then, like here, let's say, well, I like to know when, then you bring down another point. And that these become, and I would label them like A, B, C, D, E, and so that you understand, or you know, that things that are, as you're constructing it, you have more and more reference points to build with. Okay, so we also know that this part here is that core shadow. All right. So one of the things that you want to really understand is, as it wraps, your values will also go lighter, right? So the 1, 2, 3. Be careful as you're wrapping. There will be a bit of reflected light at the edge. This will be pretty solid because of sun light scenario, where it's, you know, it doesn't have that tapered value change as much. This over here, remember, there's going to be a slight value change, and I've shown you guys in some of the samples, as this sort of goes lighter, do not, make sure you do not give a white stripe here. And you also can reinforce with a background in some of the samples that I've shown you guys to show that value change, right? So these are some of the things that I wanted you guys to look at as a sunlight scenario, and this will be very, very helpful to any student that's, you know, figuring out how to set this up and how to basically formulate the sunlight scenario as we are doing on a cylinder geoform. So I hope this helps. Be careful of, again, I said, not splicing or not putting a white stroke there. Get the gradual change of the values. Your core is right here where it tangents on the sides. Both of your cores are parallel. So you want to remember that stuff. And hopefully this helps, and we'll see you in class.